All right, thanks for joining me. Today is December the 22nd, 2018. This is the Flat Earth Report, archived at infiniteplainradio.com. The title for today's live stream is Recycled News. It started with that fake meteor thing over California, and it was like the exact same thing we saw last year. The exact same thing, in fact, where there was this mysterious light, a California fireball, wows skywatchers, space.com, a mysterious light. So I look back 1 year, same thing, mysterious light. So it's like, okay, some kind of solstice ritual, probably. They send some rocket, out into the night sky when the shoppers are out looking up, and everybody assumes it's an alien. So last year, the speculation was, is this thing an alien? Is it extraterrestrial, interstellar, or whatever? Well, this year, last year they let the speculation sit there. They let people kind of wait and talk it over. A lot of people figured, well, it's aliens or whatever. Like the go-to explanation, they're like, what did Hollywood say about it? Aliens, okay, it's an alien. Well, after a few days, they admitted, nah, it was Musk. And I was a little miffed because who is Musk to throw a big heavy metal burning fireball over a populated area and not get fined or investigated? Meanwhile, they had just sent the BLM to harass Mad Mike, who wanted to launch a little tin can a couple thousand feet. So, it didn't seem fair. So here it is, they do it again. But this time, they said it was the Air Force at first. But then they said, no, actually the Air Force canceled the launch, so it wasn't the Air Force. So we're supposed to believe that this fireball that just went over everybody's heads a couple nights ago wasn't this Air Force rocket launch, but that they had actually scrapped it. And 5 minutes after they scrapped the launch, a meteor happened to fall in that area. But it looks exactly like the fake mysterious light from last year. So it's just another light show. It's just part of the theater that people take a little too seriously. But I'm calling this recycled news because that was last year, and they did it again this year. And so then I remember last year, the media was talking about, oh, Trump's going to shut down the government. And they had this story about how Chris Hadfield had nobody to talk to because they shut down Houston for the government shutdown because of that evil Republican who doesn't believe in global warming. And so Chris Hadfield is alone up there floating around 270 miles above, nobody to talk to, until he manages to reach some ham radio operators down on the ground as he passes over. And I knew it was a BS story. And then they said, oh, by the way, Super Bowl Sunday, there's going to be a big meteor that's going to pass between the Earth and the Moon, and it might kill us all, but you're not going to know about it because Trump shut down the government. And that was like this story that kept on pushing that if we shut down the government, we're all going to die. Like turning off the government is like, it's like God's getting off his throne. And they push that every year. And so, look, January 20th, 2018, not even a year ago, NASA shutdown plans follow familiar script. Will the federal government shut down? What will it do for the astronauts? I mean, this is something that was brought up last year. But last year they tried to suggest that you would miss the Super Bowl. Like they really get you where it hurts. President Donald Trump, not my President Donald Trump, excuse me. Or you can call him President Donald Musk if you like. Because of the federal government shutdown, all national parks are closed. It's such just drama. But look, this is from last year. December 5th, 2017, government shutdown 2017. Will the federal government shut down again? And on with the fear of what it's going to do. But specifically, I'm interested in what it's going to do for the astronauts. And how every year they recycle these stories. So here's the one from just a few days ago. What happens to the astronauts during the shutdown? Well, they do maintain mission essential personnel, as you would expect. Okay, so, that being said, everything that they're doing is being recycled. And so looking ahead, I'm preparing for the hoaxiversary, which is a term that we've coined to describe this phenomenon where there's a media-run psyop, whether it's terrorism or a fake shooter or something, and then the very next year they do something to commemorate it. Or this is the 10th anniversary of Sandy Hook. We're going to have a reunion. Like they're constantly doing these revisiting. And then they often, and they always do, reference other events, similar events. They make comparisons, and they extrapolate for their editorials based on how these different events say something about us collectively. It's a big heap of, what the media has been presenting as truth and what has become a de facto historical record for the last 2 decades. I mean, look at this. They're so unaccountable. Scientists project that the Arctic will be ice-free in the summer of 2013. And this is from Senator John F. Kerry, who said that climate change deniers believe that water will fall off the edge of the flat Earth. It's like, no, John, there's an ice wall, duh. Arctic will be ice-free in the summer of 2013, but not in 2050, but 4 years from now, blah, blah, blah. So, how many times have these pseudoscientists been wrong? How often is the pseudo news wrong? Like all the time. I mean, at this point, what they're trying to do and what they have been trying to do, and they've mostly done, is institute a scientocracy, which is basically a theocracy, but instead of religion, it is science, or scientism rather, pseudoscience and pseudo-media. That's the state religion for you. And their doomsday never comes true. So, and here's what they don't do. What John Kerry didn't do is say, hey, look, it's 2019. I predicted the Arctic would have been ice-free 6 years ago, and it didn't happen thanks to me and Al Gore. So you can thank us for that. No, he doesn't take credit for the victory. Whenever climate change is refuted by reality, the ones who are chicken littling the situation are never held into account, and they never take credit for things that would reflect well on the regulations they've put into place and the actions they have taken to mitigate so-called climate change. So here's a really good witness panel on the topic. This is from Commerce State Gov. Now what you're going to see here is from Data or Dogma, Promoting Open Inquiry on the Debate over the Magnitude of Human Impact on Earth's Climate. Senator Cruz is involved in this one, and it's just a panel going back and forth about whether it's actual science or scientism. Now, this is a political football that gets kicked around by people who, on both sides, believe outer space is real and that they just disagree on what we're actually being told by the satellites. But listen to this individual here and the statements he makes.
The sun's rays come in and normally...
Well, we'll get to this guy in a moment. Because what they're doing here is just making the case that you can trust science by consensus because they're all getting objective data from space, from satellites. And so if you accept the numbers, then it's just a political football. And what we're saying is, no, we reject the numbers. So they're differing on their interpretation of what we know to be a complete fabrication. I mean, that's why I call the NRA controlled opposition. That's why I call people like Lord Monckton, who professionally debate against climate scientists, controlled opposition. Because no matter how many points they score, they're still debating on a bunch of information which itself ought to be questioned. But this is more what I wanted to bring up. This was in 2015. Lamar Smith's climate views win the Flat Earth Award. So before there was any group of people running around talking about Flat Earth and owning the moniker Flat Earther, there was really just this stereotype and this caricature that didn't really exist, that the media would parade around as, oh, you don't believe in the climate scientists, you're a Flat Earther, which itself is based on the fallacy that the Flat Earth mode of thinking is some type of archaic mode of thought that preceded the Copernican revolution and was defeated by science, and that science pushed flat earthers back into the dark ages. That's a false narrative made up Fake history admitted, not true, never was true. And so the myth of the flat earther was used as a weapon to really just badger people who they now call climate denialists. Now, denialism, of course, is another one of these terms. It's a smear term, doesn't really have an objective meaning, it just means you disagree with me. I mean, if I call a spinning ball believer a flat earth denier, does it really make my case? No. So here we go. Climate change activists are going to Representative Lamar Smith's office and they give him a Flat Earth Foundation of Texas award. And of course, it's all a joke. All a joke. But this is what they call you if you're a climate change denier. Now, what's interesting about this is that I have been making the claim since I first started speaking on this topic that you cannot be a believer in global warming without accepting a lot of the information that comes from orbiting satellites. So you kind of have to recognize that it's not really consistent to believe in global warming if you don't believe in a globe. It doesn't quite make sense. Now, if you believe it's an enclosed system, then it could theoretically exist. Sure, you could make that case. But climate science as it's presented now, specifically as a political agenda, you can't really say it's a completely objective science. And so you have no real basis for believing in it, especially if you've rejected the spinning ball model. Yet, when pressed, the actual Flat Earth Society, which we know to be a government-controlled opposition movement, they said not only do they believe in climate change, but they say it would be irresponsible to not believe in it. And that's been the line for quite some time, but they've been actually turning it up a bit on this particular line of thought, where last week ABC put out a piece which said that climate change deniers, let me show you, are the biggest threats to mankind's continued existence. ABC.net, climate change denial is delusion and the biggest threat. So what they're trying to do here is not just say that these people are a threat to progress, but that your non-belief affects the way you vote, which prevents the government from solving the problem, and the problem claims so many lives per year. So your inaction is actually a liability. So they've been putting this moral burden on you for not believing in it. You don't believe in the wrath of globe, which has just replaced the wrath of God. It's just a control system. It's eschatology. It's doom mongering. It's superstition. That's all. But it's just a matter of time until they start making the case that it's a matter of national security. Now, that's what I brought up this for. In this conversation, on this panel, Data or Dogma Promoting Open Inquiry, in the debate over the magnitude of human impact on Earth's climate, they talk about the national security implications for taking action on climate change and why people who don't believe in it are, in effect, a threat to our collective national security. I've heard people like Bill Nye even suggest that denying climate change is akin to hate speech and ought to be criminalized. In fact, he blames, and he's not the only one, they blame terrorism on climate change. I mean, needless to say, the terrorist acts that they blame on climate change are hoaxes, but the narrative is there. And it's actually very intricate how they do it. So how does global warming cause terrorism? Like, how did you, as a consumer, cause some Muslim to kill 15 people at a Christmas party? And of course, I'm referring to a psyop in San Bernardino. Well, your consumption, and you probably didn't recycle, you probably breathed too much. So your environmental impact pushed us past the tipping point. The world got a little too hot, and somewhere in the Middle East, Afghanistan, they had a drought. Because of the drought, a bunch of farmers lost their jobs. So they want to go work. So they go to the city, But I'm sorry, the city has no jobs because of economic instability, because of warmongering Americans coming to steal fossil fuels. So here they are jobless and looking for something to do, and they're giving someone to blame because the terrorist recruiters tell them, hey, you would have jobs if it wasn't for the Americans and their wars, their interventionism, and if it wasn't for global warming. And so we're rightfully to blame for their predicament. And so when they come over here and shoot up a Christmas party, it's perfectly justified. I mean, that's Bill Nye the Science Guy. That's science. So you can't argue with that logic, right? And of course, it's all your fault. But let me bring this character up here. You just got to hear this just for a minute. It's going to be a little droning, but
that the Earth rotates around the sun. And today, the global warming alarmists have taken the language of the Roman Inquisition, going so far as labeling anyone who dares point to the actual science as a denier, which is, of course, the language of religion. It is calling someone a heretic. And anytime you hear people saying scientists should not question the conventional wisdom, you are hearing someone advocating essentially for the abolition of science. Senator Udall.
see, that's pretty solid. You know, there's a lot of things that Senator Cruz has said on this topic and other topics that are very valid. They make some very principled arguments against scientism. The issue is they don't know how deep it actually goes. But I do contend that the people who are probably closest to understanding the why behind a massive deception are the same people who understand the climate change hoax and why it exists and what its purpose is. And he makes a very good point here about science shouldn't really be about believing the right experts. You know, it really should be about the facts. But it's become, in fact, a form of secular priesthood. Okay, so let's continue. If you didn't know, everything here gets archived over at infiniteplainradio.com. And if you go there, you can subscribe. Dan W. says, journalism at the edge of the world. Yep, that's the Flat Earth Report, journalism at the edge of the world. The idea here is we go to places where controlled media doesn't go, where alternative media doesn't go, and where so-called independent media doesn't go. There is no alternative media. It's just astroturfed MSM on both sides. There is no independent media insofar as the so-called independent voices are bouncing their opinions off of the big green screens of the day, the big teleprompters of the day, just reacting to it. You know, really, there is no alternative media. There is the mediated reality, which is a fundamentalist worldview, and then there's those who have stepped outside of it. There is this post-media mindset, but it's really, you're one of three. You're either misinformed, uninformed, or informed. And if you don't watch the news, well, you're uninformed. If you watch it, you're misinformed. And the problem is people who don't watch it are by default going to go along with the masses because they won't have enough information to discredit or debunk whatever is being proposed. So you might have a number of people who know an event to be a hoax because they've investigated, and then you have the masses who just believe it. Well, the ones who don't pay attention are going to default away from the conspiracy theorists, the so-called heretics, you know, this group of people who for some strange reason don't believe what the TV tells them. Okay, so we are closing in at the end of 2018. I'm trying to come up with 10 predictions for 2019. We did it last year. We said the ISS would come down. It hasn't yet, but it has a hole in it, so it's leaking. We had a number of predictions, and that was pretty much right, though. That the reason why they're bringing it down isn't because it's rickety and it's falling apart, because it's a movie. The reason why they're bringing it down is they have to upgrade the special effects, and they're going to have to do it in a new vessel. You can't suddenly have people doing more elaborate movements in the ISS when all these years they've been dangling like stiff corpses at a gallows. And so in order to affect the change and not, break the illusion, they're going to have to upgrade it. I'm curious as to what the new moon's going to look like. The new fake moon, I came up with a new 30-second moon landing debunk. All you really need, if you think about it. Like, okay, so let me find you a picture of the moon. It's quite simple. You look at the moon on any picture they show you where the astronauts are, and then look at the horizon line. It's always this hill, like 50 yards away. But where is the landscape? Where's the moonscape? Where's the moon? You know, if you're on a ball, even 1,000 miles diameter, from where you're standing, the horizon line is still going to be at your eye level, and it's going to be a considerable distance, miles, you're going to see. And from any of the lunar photography, show me somewhere where you see a sunlit plain of craters. You don't. Show me where you see anything more than what you would see in a warehouse. There's no landscape. There's no moonscape. The only time you see any great distances is when it's the footage from something orbiting, but you don't see it from the ground. And the accounts of the astronauts, by the accounts of the astronauts themselves, the horizon was bendy, and that turning around was disorienting because the horizon kept bending and they weren't used to it because they were used to a flat horizon on Earth. That to me sounds scripted to exaggerate the smallness of the moon and really convey the rotundity. Why else would you say something so ridiculous? The horizon wouldn't bend like that unless you were standing on top of something the size of like a Goodyear blimp, maybe. But the moon isn't that small. I mean, relative to the size of an astronaut. So to me, a 30-second debunk. I also have a one shot, one kill against the ISS. Just look at the latest time lapse of the rocket called Progress that was sent up to refuel the ISS. It goes perpendicular from the Earth to space. There's no gravity tilt. Like, that's never been done before. That's not how it works. They get it wrong in all the science fiction movies, and now they get it wrong in the ISS. It's like, if any of you guys are listening in the space movie industry, when rockets go up to refill the space station, they don't go perpendicular. They go up into a gravity tilt, they make a couple of loops, and then they dock. But in your time lapses, these things go straight up. And here's where it's contradicted. From the ground, you see the rocket make a clear arc. You see it from the ground every time. But from the ISS, that thing is perpendicular until it goes into space. It's a continuity error, is what you would call it. It's a continuity error. All right, so let's see. There was something else. Our sports idols are ruining our brains. I'm not impressed with Stephen Curry. I think Stephen Curry is a coward. Or he just doesn't understand. Well, maybe he doesn't appreciate what Kyrie Irving was really saying. You know, skepticism. You know, if we go back to this panel, data or dogma, a lot of it is about the role of skepticism and what skepticism means within the context of science and how necessary it is to prevent the accumulation of dogma. And dogma is just entrenched belief. We believe it because it was believed by the person before us and they believed it before us. And to question the dogma, of course, is to be accused of what? Heresy. You're not towing the line. You're politically incorrect. And the MSM is your state church. They set the parameters of discourse. They set the taboos. And their purpose there is to convey to you what the will of God is. But let's listen to this guy for just a moment here, because they have a number of things to say here about skepticism and what it means, but they also contradict it by what sounds to me like it's almost our responsibility to trust the experts.
And oftentimes it is about weighing the opinions of folks. And in this case, the scales of justice or of weighing are clearly on a side different than what we've heard from 4 of the 5 witnesses. So today you had that opportunity to present that view in a very unbalanced way. It would have been great if we could have had 100 scientists and had 97 telling us one thing and the 3 of you something else. That's not what we have, but I think it's important to keep that image in.
Now, this is what he was suggesting, and this was the part I wanted to show you, was he was kind of mad that you had three people who believed in climate change, scientists that is, and three people who were doubting it. So it was fair and balanced. But he felt like there should have been 97 believers to the three non-believers. They have this over-reliance on consensus building and the belief that science is something arrived at by a mass consensus. And in a way, that's how it works in a scientocracy, when it's not really about science or the scientific method. It's actually about experts who use scientific dogmas in order to bolster the claims of politicians. So, for example, a politician decides they want to raise taxes. Well, you get the scientists to say, well, it would be irresponsible, like the Flat Earth Society says. It'd be irresponsible to deny what we're saying. Like, it's not only wrong to not believe in us because we're saying that things are getting warmer and bad things will happen climate-wise, but it's irresponsible to not believe us. Like, it's doomsaying, and you could call it extortion. And this government shutdown narrative that they've recycled this year is really no different. This government shutdown narrative it's tantamount to extortion in a way that they're saying, if we don't keep paying, then this will happen. And last year it was, if we don't keep paying the government, guess what? We're going to get hit by a meteor on Super Bowl Sunday, and it's all your fault. And Chris Hadfield's going to be lonely up there in the tin can. Okay, Stephen Curry, I want to see here. There's no shortage of celebrity. Now, this is from Grand Central, grandstandcentral.com. Just look at how the average person, the average writer, sports writer, looks at the topic of science. There's no shortage of celebrity takes that apparently bring some doubt into long-established science. Long-established science. Bringing doubt into long-established science. Okay, let's just take that little clip there. Okay, so if it's not open to doubt and to new facts, it's not science. Isn't that like one of the basic rules here? So, it's really bad for celebrities to bring doubt into long-established science. Well, what do you mean? If it's so like well-established, it could reestablish itself. If some ball dribbler says, hey, the sky is green, you could go out and check the science, observe. No, it's not. It's not like the ball dribbler questioning the color of the sky is going to change anything. You see how sensitive these are? These pundits are about their worldview. And the Stephen Curry thing was just pure, I think. I mean, I don't know if he was put up to it, but Irving never backed down from what he was actually doing. He wasn't just asserting, oh, it's flat. No, he was asking fundamental questions, and there's a lot of questions that go behind it. It's not this caricature that they've been wielding around, this mythical flat earther who represents refusal to believe in science, whatever the hell that means anyway. That's not really what it means. It's like it's almost an arrogance on their side, the ones who are true believers who've never questioned it, to think that you having strayed from it is some kind of a intellectual deficit. It's just like when believers in some religion say, oh, the non-believers are wicked. Oh, you're wicked, right? And that's what it is. It's like, oh, they're wicked, or they haven't had the benefit of reading, they haven't read our books, so they're ignorant. So you're ignorant or you're wicked. But in some way you're fallen. It's something wrong with you. It's not that what they believe might be questionable, or maybe it's not the only way. It's like a form of, piety or something. Holier than thou. And the truth is, if you want to know more about the Bible and religion in general, you're probably better off asking an atheist who knows it from the inside out versus a believer who was handed the book, put it on a shelf, and just attends the services once a week. And it's the same with the heliocentric model and outer space and the constant barrage of space propaganda and how it ties into the space culture industry. If you want to understand where that's at, you're better off asking a flat-tard like me, which is what they would say, then a believer in the ball who's never questioned it, because they've never actually questioned these for the most part. Okay, they see a rocket on space. Oh, rockets are going up. They believe it. Oh, there's satellite up. There's satellites orbiting, and there's space junk. Huge garbage dump of space junk up there. I believe it because I saw it on TV. Oh, we got a proby thingy on Mars. I believe it. And how come we didn't get a Twitter feed? With like video, live video from that one, by the way. When the Japanese sent those two frying pan sized probes to that Meteor 220 million miles away, the ones that are orbiting by bouncing on it, we got video feedback the next day. And that's 220 million miles. And here we have NASA landing their CGI thingy on the CGI ball, and all we get is a couple of lousy pictures and a selfie. And one thing about selfies, why are these probes taking selfies? It's pretty simple. It's just public outreach to the youth. It's to help humanize these things. It's like, how did you program something to make selfies, to take selfies millions of miles away on that luminary? How did you program it before people were even taking selfies? Nobody was taking selfies when that rover was launched up there. And you're going to tell me that the people at NASA had already kind of pre-built that functionality into the thing? Nope. Nope. They make it up as they go. Like everything else, they're making it up as they go. Okay, so Stephen Curry, by the way, said it was a joke. It was a joke about the moon landing. He says, for kids out there that hang on every word we say, which is important, understand you should not believe something just because someone says it. Do your own research. Make sure you understand what you actually believe. Nothing wrong with that, right? But if you do your own research, look at how they're already attempting to censor it. If you look at videos on the Apollo moon landing hoax, right beneath it, you get corrected by Encyclopedia Britannica. It's all just automatic, like contextual advertising. Like, to me, that's a red flag. Huge red flag. And it's not going to work. The people have gone so far as to reject that the Earth is even moving. They're not going to be swayed by, subtle little posts like that. Subtle course corrections. Like, no, man, you're wrong. Just read this article. Just read this. It's like, no, we know what that article says. One of the biggest lies is, if you search flat Earth, like the biggest lie shows up, number one. It says, flat Earth is an archaic model of the world. No, it's not. Not really. The flat earther is a modern invention in terms of it being a form of thought or a mode of thinking. And look at these headlines: The Disinformation Factory, or Why YouTube Loves Flat Earth. They're all just referring back to the same line that was really hit heavily by that professor who wrote The Death of Expertise, where he said, the internet is not a library, it's a dumpster. In other words, you need a bunch of people with PhDs to sort it out for you because you can't do it for yourself. Same mindset, as the pre-Reformation priesthood, who were like, no, you can't put it in the common tongue. Got to make sure that the priests are there as a necessity to interpret this very important information. And so if we get rid of arguments from authority, what do you really have to support any model, biblical or otherwise? Really none, when it comes down to it, none. That's why I advocate post-modelism, meaning we don't have enough information. It's arrogant and presumptuous to think that we do, and maybe we ought to put the horse in front of the cart and become seekers over believers. And right now, we're just looking at a world of believers confronting what they see as just a new belief system, when it's really not. Flat Earth is not a religion. It's not a cohesive set of beliefs. It's not even anything other than a label handed to people that have rejected the default worldview. You could easily say, I'm not a flat earther, I'm an earther, and you are a spinning baller trying to impose your worldview on me, and I'm not entertained by CGI cartoons, so I'm not buying. The burden of proof has to be shifted, and it's not just at the fake pseudoscience, but the pseudo-news. The pseudo-news and the pseudoscience needs to go. And that's really what this is about. It's not about the shape of the world. All right, I'll be back later. Stay subscribed.
Flat Earth report come out of the House Intelligence Committee as to what happened with Russia.
A flat Earth report. Those are striking terms.